A 16-year-old girl in Nebraska has been told by a court of law that she is, quote, not mature or well-informed enough to have an abortion. But she is mature enough to become a single mother of a child that she cannot afford. The girl, who is remaining anonymous at this point, her identity is not being released. This girl has pleaded to a court for her right to an abortion because her foster parents are very religious, and she feared that if she went to them with her desire to get an abortion, that they would reject her pleas for an abortion and even kick her out for wanting one. So she went straight to the court. Unfortunately for her, the judge is a former member of the anti-choice organization Metro Right to Life, as well as a known member and speaker of other pro-life organizations. And he told the girl that he would not allow her to get an abortion and said, quote, when you have the abortion, it's going to kill the child inside of you. Now, under Nebraska law, minors have to attain written parental consent before undergoing an abortion, but since this girl was in foster care, the decision should have defaulted to her, but the conservative courts disagreed and took matters into their own hands. Unfortunately, up until 2011, only parental notification, meaning the child had to notify their parents of an abortion, was required. But in 2011, they decided to add more laws and restrictions that prevent minors from seeking abortions that they may need. So this is another disaster story of a 16-year-old girl whose life has been taken out of her hands, and she's being forced to carry this pregnancy to term.
So you want to talk about big government, right? You want to talk about big government? This seems like big government telling you what you can and can't do with your body. Now, I understand that you have that normally you would have to get parental consent. I can understand that, and I think that's a big decision. But in this case, the fact that his political beliefs, his personal religious moral beliefs as well, factored into this. Judges are supposed to be impartial. They're supposed to judge based on the law, right? And I don't think that this decision was based on the law whatsoever. It was, I'm going to put my morality on you. I'm going to put my belief system upon you and tell you what you can do with your body, instead of letting the law, which should have defaulted to her since she was a foster child, correct?
Yes.
Letting her make her own decision. Instead, this guy is saying that simply, well, you're not mature enough to make your own decisions.
Okay, and
but
under Nebraska,
I'm going to make the decision for you, and I'm going to say that you're mature enough to become a mother.
Yes.
A single mother without enough income to take care of the child.
Right. And that same judge would likely not be in favor of her, living off of the welfare system, which she will undoubtedly need now.
Inevitably have to have, because, like I said, you can't, people who have children as teenagers, teenage mothers, and single mothers, they make up a large portion of people in poverty.
Right,
believe
of
it
course.
or not.
Now, also, yeah, her lawyer was absolutely disgusted by this ruling and said that the judge should have recused himself since he was obviously biased and did not handle this in an objective legal manner. And under Nebraska law, if parental consent cannot be gotten, then there can be exceptions made in cases of abuse, which is the reason that she was put in foster care in the first place. So that could have been used as a legal reason for her to be allowed to get an abortion.
That didn't have to do with this case. It would have been if her foster parents were abusing her. Like right. She was abused earlier.
Well, one could make the argument that religious indoctrination is a form of abuse, but...
And one could make the argument that it's still relevant, the fact that she's in foster care because she was abused in her other home, and now she's gotten pregnant because she obviously had, she's obviously been traumatized and disturbed and, made a bad choice, and now she needs an abortion. But there's also another law under Nebraska law that states that in cases such as this, where parental consent cannot be gotten or she's in foster care or whatnot, that a judge can rule that she is mature enough to make the decision for herself. And that's basically what this judge did.
No, and remember,
is took that away from her and said, you're not mature enough, you're not well informed enough, you can't make this decision.
And remember, she went and argued. She said, look, I have no financial means to take care of this child. I'm not going to be able to provide for this child the life that, this child would deserve. And it will impact me. I'm a student, I'm still in high school, I'm still trying to do something for myself, and yes, I made a bad decision, but that doesn't mean that I should have to be forced to bear the consequences of that bad decision for the rest of my life. It's already
and force an unborn child.
Yes,
and force an unborn child to live with those consequences for the rest of their life.
Look, it's bad enough.
Well, there's
to go through a teen pregnancy. Okay, it's bad enough to be put in that position in the first place, and not only that, but it's bad enough to have to go through an abortion in the first place. Okay, this is already incredibly traumatic for this young woman, and to force her now to go through raising a child for the rest of her life, that's even more traumatic.
But there's like an overall, like, the thing is I get what you guys are saying, right? And I don't agree with the judge's ruling, but I don't agree that the judge should rule on the state of mind of a person, on whether or not somebody who's underage is overage in this specific instance, but in other instances, like, I think that's ridiculous, and there's no, like, objective way to rule on that. So I don't agree with the way that process works. But basically, what the law says is if you don't want your kid can't get surgery without your consent. Your kid can't get a prescription without your consent in most cases, so that they can't get an abortion without parental consent. So that's what the law is, right? Now the problem is that she's in foster care, so, like, does that automatically make her an adult just because she's in foster care, but she's not emancipated? So there's, like, problems there. So then does the decision fall to the state or her foster parents? And if it falls to their state, according to Roe versus Wade, the state can't say no, before that, whatever the 24 weeks timeline. But if it falls to her foster parents, then she has to get consent. The way it works is it's to your parents, right? And to my understanding, in this case, it would have went to her foster parents. But she didn't believe her foster parents would sign the consent form. So she went to a judge and wanted to get approval from the judge to override her her foster parent situation. But you run into another problem with the foster parents is do you believe that the foster parents are an extension of the state? Because then they can't say no. So I'm like, I understand that something wrong happened here, but, like, how do you fix it? Do you have the judge recuse himself? Like, are you guys okay with it being allowed to have parental consent, but not in the case of foster kids? Or do you want
actually,
the law?
I'm actually going to take the stance that I don't believe that parental consent should be required at all. Because
right.
no one should ever be forced to have a child to term if they don't want it to term before 20 weeks, before 20 or 24 weeks, whatever the cutting point is off, when it becomes, too dangerous, and it's more obvious that, this is a viable person in here. But insofar as, like, when abortion is allowed in that time frame, I don't think that anyone should be restricted from getting an abortion who wants one, who is seeking one. If a 14-year-old is pregnant and she is still living with her legal parents, and they're not abusive, but they just don't want her to get an abortion, I think she should be able to go somewhere and get an abortion anyway, because it's not their decision to make. They shouldn't be able to force their child to have another child to term.
You're getting into, what kind of rights parents should have.
I'm not. I'm trying to say, how do you fix it? Because the law is set up because parents didn't want their kids to get abortions without them knowing, right? Because they felt that that's their child, and
and they feel that it should be their decision. You see, this is really difficult because you have to weigh the rights of the parents as well as the rights of the child, but that child is also pregnant. So I mean, it gets very, very difficult. You know what I mean?
But there's there's three choices. There's three choices. Either you put it entirely in the hands of the kid, right? You put it entirely in the hands of the parent, and you have this weird judge system that they have, or you move the age. You move it to like 15 or 16.
But does it have to be always just one, or can it be more of on a case-by-case basis?
But then you're gonna have
a judge being a judge. You see what I mean? Of actually ruling on the merits of the case. And
but what if the problem is all right. So if this guy was pro-life, and which he was, and he voted to allow her to make the decision, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then nobody would have made it an issue. But if he was pro-choice, and I don't know, the girl was 12, right? Because and he said go ahead. And then she takes the pill and has a bad reaction. I'm not sure how possible this is, but you know what? People can have bad reactions to medicine. She takes the pill, has a bad reaction, and she dies, right? Then they'll blame the judge for that. Like, so do you leave it to the judge? Let's say it's later in the term, right? Let's say she's at 20 weeks, right? And it's more of a surgical procedure, and she dies from an infection from that, right? And like the kid's 13. Like, was she adult enough to die from a procedure that her parents didn't know that she had? So to me, you get into a lot of like gray areas in here.
No, you do, absolutely. That's what makes it such a difficult kind of case. That I think that it really should be taken more on a case-by-case basis.
But that's the thing. It's like, that's why I'm not like super outraged by this. Like, I think the judge should have recused himself. That's the most outrageous part to me.
Right, and I will definitely agree with that. But when it comes to taking certain rights away from parents, I'm not as comfortable with that, because I think that the parents, they should have be able to do some input, because that child is still legally,
that kid can't smoke, join the army, like you know what I mean, like there's but at
the same time, I don't think that she was. In this case, I don't think she was mature enough to be forced to have that child. But at the same time, I also want to say that she wasn't mature enough to have an abortion too, or to realize the consequences of having unprotected sex or getting pregnant. But at the same time, I wouldn't want to be the person to force her to raise a child on her own. I mean, this is nobody wins in this situation. This is lose-lose.
That's what I'm saying. It's actually a really messy and convoluted case. Like, what basically the problem is that in Nebraska, they decided that the parents have to be informed and they have to give consent, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which sounds in general like a reasonable position. If it was any other medical procedure, then most people would be like 80% of people would say yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then once you say that, and they created an exemption, and one of the exemptions is a judge, right? And I think the exemption itself is stupid. Like, the judge can't tell, like, the maturity of you. Like, what is it? You filed all the paperwork correctly. Congratulations, you're the mature person. You found a lawyer. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And then there's, like, the fourth issue is that she's a foster kid. So are foster kids special or different from other kids? Are they automatically more mature and allowed to make their own decisions, or does it fall to the state or the foster parents? And then if it does fall to the state or the foster parents, are they subject to Roe versus Wade? where in fact they can't say no.
But like I said, this is where it goes back into, I think, the judge being able to do his job and judge fairly, impartially, and say, look,
Right.
we've reviewed, your decisions. We've gotten to know who you are, and we've gotten to know the decisions that you've made, and I want to basically do my job and rule on the fact that, do I think, because are some people more mature than others? Yes.
Yeah,
Of
but
course.
legally we don't give people that. We don't say you're a mature 17-year-old, so you can drink alcohol this week, or like, you know what I mean?
Well, I'm saying that, but this is not that simple of an issue. This is a very complex issue, which is why, once again, I want to say, let the judge be a judge and get into it, and really, since it is such a convoluted, difficult issue, you have to get more discretion, I think, because
Right.
you can't just have a blanket law